Welcome, everybody. We are so grateful, and we want to welcome you to the Alive and Thrive show. We're Tanya Walker and Mike Finelli, and we're the co-creators of this movement. And we want you to know that our mission is to create a conscious movement for people that want to feel alive and thrive in their relationships. And we want you to express yourself and to be able to grow through personal empowerment in order to create those authentic and connected relationships that you all want and that you deserve.
Hey, Tanya, good to see you again.
Hey, Mike.
So we're very grateful, and every week we have an exciting topic that we like to discuss, everything to do with relationships, and this week is no different than any other week. So I think today's really the topic that we wanted to talk about is choosing relationships from a place of empowerment. So it's an important topic because one of the most significant social dysfunctions we have is that we validate our self-worth based on our relationship status. So the premise is that if someone chooses us, we're worthy of being chosen. So we send this message to ourselves that my self-worth is in the act of being chosen, not us consciously doing the choosing. So essentially, we count on someone else outside of ourselves to be responsible for our value, to validate us and accept us, right? But it's interesting because we can't be blamed entirely for this phenomenon, because there is also this acceptable societal hierarchy when it comes to relationships. So if we're married, so if you picture a pyramid, if we're married, we're at the top of the pyramid. And just below that is engaged. And then almost on the bottom is single. So if we are divorced or that divorce status, we are shamed and relegated even lower than being single. So what is disturbing is that with this pyramid, we tend to value ourselves and other people with the same criteria. We assume that someone single is miserable and should have someone. So, or even worse, there's something wrong with them, right? So the less we value ourselves, the more we buy into this notion that if I'm single, I am not being chosen. And if I'm not chosen, I am not worthy, or something is wrong with me. So in turn, we kind of feel this shame and this guilt. We may even fear of being alone. So what happens is we self-sabotage by abandonment of self in kind of very subtle ways at first, and then almost entirely. So it translates into a kind of accepting particular lifestyles that are not in alignment, behaviors that are outside of our boundaries, and not living in our values. And we further self-sabotage by staying in those relationships. So when we live in that place of lack of self-love, we self-abandon by choosing unavailable partners for the sake of being seen and accepted, and justify it by satisfying the need to be in a relationship and not being single. So cleverly masked as an emotion that we call being in love. But when the kind of the honeymoon phase is over and both parties kind of settle into their patterns, negative biases, fears, and insecurities, we blame it on our partner that they've changed, right? How many times do we kind of say that, oh, my partner's changed. He or she is not the same as they used to be. Even though this can happen in very negative ways, like with abuse and violence, right? So I want to make sure that that caveat is expressed. And we further continue to disconnect from our partner when we don't feel that connection. However, oftentimes when we don't love and choose ourselves unconditionally, and our partner doesn't choose us, so meaning, they're a hell yes all the time, we feel disconnected from them. So what do we do is we eventually self-sabotage by starting fights, causing drama by acting out on the stories of our own lack of worth, and eventually even think about cheating. So again, we're seeking for something outside of us that we lack internally, and we're always looking for that in a partner. So it's interesting because this phenomenon is universal regardless of our relationship status. Those of us that are single choose unavailable partners to start relationships with, and those in relationships who stay in that particular dysfunctionality most often is to fill this unhealthy need, like this need to be chosen, and call it convenience. We even stay for the children when really it's an abandonment of self and using children, a lifestyle, or security as a justification. So we stay and we settle. So until we actually do the internal work and transcend our past hurts, forgive ourselves for our past behaviors, learn new patterns, embrace our anxieties, and fearlessly accept that we are worthy of better, we will continue to live in that life of mediocrity when it comes to our relationships. So real transformation comes from seeing and choosing ourselves first. By doing this, it allows us to choose our partner from a place of empowerment and not desperation. So, you know, there's a lot there that I went through, but, you know, this is kind of where we're at when it comes to what I feel is the modern relationship, right?
Yeah, I think you touched on so many valid points here, and so many points that many of us aren't taking the time to delve into ourselves and really look at the landscape of our relationship. I mean, there's just so many factors, right, Mike, that come into play into cultivating those healthy, meaningful, and authentic connections that we not only want, that we ultimately deserve. But there's just such a forsaking of self that takes place. And you had so many valid touch points. And, you know, if we want to go back to the beginning of what you were saying, it's based upon connections. And when we connect to somebody, what are you connecting to? I don't think, and you and I have had many discussions about, you know, your value system and your boundaries and all of that. And that we'll get into down the road in other shows. But what are you basing those connections on? Because I'll be honest with you, my first initial connections were absolutely unequivocally based upon sexual chemistry and that attraction to a physicality. Mm-hmm. And it's because I didn't know that I should be diving deeper into that other human being to see if we're really a good fit on all levels, on all the multi-dimensions that we are.
Yeah, and that's the interesting point there, is that we can go back to, we're not really taught on how to choose someone to be in a relationship with. Oftentimes, again, we get into the relationships just for the fact that it's almost like, you know, you kind of have that social function where someone says, he or she is single. And then you're like, wow, he's beautiful, or like she's beautiful, or he's so handsome. And why are they single?
There must be something wrong with them.
Something wrong with them, like I mentioned earlier. So there's almost this weirdness about having to be in a relationship. You know, I feel like like we talk about, is that a relationship really needs to start with us first, and be our best version of ourselves, and feeling worthy and feeling love for ourselves, and having that self-love in which we teach so often, and that we talk about, that that's where the focus needs to be. And like you were saying, the selection of a partner, whether it's sexual chemistry or not, for me personally was about, does that person like me? Great. Now I feel chosen. Like, it's the reason why
100%
this material was written, is because that was me. It was I was never really like a serial dater, or it was just kind of like, I meet somebody and then I'm all in. Yeah. Because there's subconscious need to be accepted by someone else, because only then would I feel worthy.
And we start making plans, right? We meet someone and everything. We don't even know how the other person's really feeling, because God forbid that we actually talk about our feelings and our emotions and bring that to the surface, which is what we should be doing initially in a relationship. And we're bypassing this whole important element of really connecting and getting to know somebody in the beginning, so that we're really not even, I hate to say it, but wasting our time. Because I completely felt validated when I felt that somebody was choosing me. I mean, I thought, wow, this person, you know, really likes me for who I am. But in the end, they really didn't know who I was, because I hadn't shared any of my vulnerabilities with them. Mm-hmm. And
I'm sorry. And that's
we all have a need to be chosen, right? We're humans, and it's part that we want to be connected to something.
Yeah. And that's interesting. We refer to it as the honeymoon phase, but it's almost that phase of, I'm going to kind of be a version of me, but not completely. Right. I don't want you to see me fully. It's almost like, I want you to spend enough time with me, settle in, almost develop a certain amount of feelings for each other, and then I'm going to reveal my true self. And then everything starts to fall apart, because it's like, who is this person? You know what I mean?
Hell breaks loose because you've camouflaged who you are. And it's funny you're saying that, because I was thinking yesterday as I was mentally preparing for the show, thinking back to a time where I was about to go on a date, and, you know, this guy was going to pick me up, and it was like, oh my God, my hair, my lipstick. Oh, this isn't perfect. And then I'm looking around my apartment and making sure like everything is absolutely perfect. And I'm thinking, I am so far from perfect.
Yeah.
But that's what I wanted to put out there. I wanted to put this persona out of who I was, and down the road they get to see who I am, and they didn't end up choosing me in the long run because that wasn't who I was.
Yeah.
And I think so many of us are guilty of that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just kind of being that authentic self can be very challenging for us as well. And again, the environments that we are in this current world, you know, the selfie world, and the world of filters and things like that, which also make it, you know, very challenging for us to be able to be and feel empowered within ourselves, to be able to say, yeah, I feel great, I feel amazing, I feel fulfilled being alone. And it almost seems like the pyramid should be reversed. Like if you're single and you're killing it, you're like prime candidate, right? It's kind of taking that pyramid and reversing it.
Absolutely, because you're so powerful. You're so powerful at the top because you're in your own element 100%.
Yeah. And then it's like you graduate to that, as opposed to the other way around, where you're shamed. Like if you're married, then it's like almost like the cream of the crop now, but it's almost like if you feel empowered being single, and being single is okay. Shit, who knows? Maybe most of us will stay single. You know, I don't know. Like, right? It's kind of that dynamic. So,
but then you have people worrying about you, like, oh, are you okay? You know, I know you don't have a partner in your life. Like, are you doing all right? And it's almost like you feel shame because people are feeling sorry for you. And that brings me to another topic, is that I've noticed throughout my lifetime, and you and I have noticed in our dual coaching practices with our clients, is that if you're single and your friends have partners, once they become involved in their relationships, you get left by the wayside oftentimes, because now they're only doing couples things. Yeah. So now they're going to have their girls' weekend or their boys' weekend or whatever you want to call it. They're going to make that special time for the single person.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's that kind of that social dynamic, right? And that's happened to me many times. You know, friends have been married and then disappear off the face of the planet. I'm guilty of that also. And it's interesting. We can get into the dynamics of when you are, you know, married or coupled with someone, is again, not forgetting yourself, so you can remain in that place of empowerment where you are not necessarily codependent on the relationship to be yourself or to be the best version of yourself. But we tend to not only create an abandonment of self while we're in a relationship consciously, but we do it unconsciously also by not, you know, respecting ourselves and going to the gym every morning, even though there are other couple responsibilities to be done, to say, hey, I want to continue to be fulfilled in myself. I want to continue to fill my cup. So you're not counting on your partner to do that for you. And when they're not a hell yes, you can be a hell yes for yourself, right?
Which we should be in the beginning, because there's this huge misconception out there that if you're single, I think particularly after a certain age, people think you're broken, right? Yeah. And we've both witnessed more couples who, you know, continue to argue and are living these disconnected lives, and they can't communicate between one another. You see these couples out in restaurants, they're going out on what they call their date night, and they both order something to drink, and then one person's over looking this way, the other person's looking that way. And they're so consumed with what everybody else in the restaurant's doing that they don't even know how to connect between the two of them.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you can always tell which one is the new date and which one are the people that have been together for 5 or 15 or 20 years. Because the ones on the new date are smiling and they're laughing and they're sharing stories, and the people that have been together for 10, 15 years, they're almost, they ran out of material 14 years ago. Yeah. Which is kind of interesting, because we have this construct that that's the way that it should be. And you know what? Maybe I can see how you know, after a few years, there's that freshness is gone if you don't cultivate the relationship.
Well,
But
there's that
also,
level of comfort that comes in being
right.
able to sit in silence. But if it's that ongoing silence that's between you when you're at home, when you're in the car, and when you're out in public, then there's something that's being put into your face that you need to take some action
Yeah.
and do something.
Yeah, and silence is okay. I mean, as we know, it's okay to kind of be in that being comfortable with that silence. But again, going back to the abandonment of self, you know, if more people took the time more so to cater to themselves and
Right.
always feel and come from a great place, which means having activities on their own, not necessarily doing everything with their partner,
Right.
then hey, when we're on a date night, you're going to talk about the activity that happened outside of the relationship. So what
Yes.
you're doing is you're almost boyfriend and girlfriend in the honeymoon phase, because you're bringing new material and new things to talk about, new dynamic to talk about within the relationship. So
Absolutely. And
yeah,
it's all part of that evolution, right? We want to continue to evolve individually. It's really, really important to be centered, to be grounded within yourself and who you are, and to know where you're coming from, and to be able to share and communicate that to your partner. And I agree with you. It's wonderful to have those really intimate connections with your partner. I mean, there's nothing more beautiful than that, but there's also something to be said to have that intimate connection to yourself,
yeah, yeah, absolutely,
you know?
absolutely.
And yeah, I don't know. I found, I don't know, well, I do know about you, but for myself, I found choosing myself was probably one of the hardest things to do, because it's not something that we're taught. We're not taught as young children. We're always taught to typically forsake ourselves. You be kind to this person. You respect your elders. You better be nice to this person because they're family.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, we have all these external stressors coming at us, telling us who to be, but we're not told to love ourselves first. And in loving ourselves first is the way that you are going to be able to choose those relationships from empowerment.
yeah.
And you're going to be able to choose that person who's also in their personal empowerment, which makes the whole dynamic of the relationship so much healthier.
Yeah, because then it becomes a choice of two conscious people to say, there's whole me, there's whole you. Now let's bring those entities together and become a third entity of two wholes that will create another strong entity together, but still strong individually. I mean, we definitely, we could get into kind of the different attachment styles when it comes to relationships, and that's going to
Right.
be probably for another show.
Yeah.
But there are different styles, and some people bring in more strength than the other, and that's where the kind of the team play comes in. But I think what we're talking about here is that, oh, if you're good at finances and I'm not, great, you take care of the finances. No, what we're talking about is feeling the wholeness as a person from a self-love perspective, not
Right.
not your skills in accounting and finances,
Right.
but your wholeness to say that I feel good in my own shoes. When I look in the mirror, I feel great. When I'm alone, I feel wonderful. I respect myself. I know my boundaries.
Yeah.
I self-care. I have self-compassion for myself, for my flaws, and all of that, all of those things that you bring into a relationship as a glass full kind of person, where even if there's a drought, you're still going to be okay, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So that's what's important about that particular point and dynamic, is not just strengths that you bring into the relationship to create a third entity, but it's the wholeness that you have for yourself that's going to create an environment of that is filled with peace and love. Yeah.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I mean, these are actually, they're skills. They're skills that should be taught from the time we're young. We are not taught how to cultivate healthy relationships. I
Yeah.
mean, I remember, bringing boyfriends home and my parents saying, "Oh, wow, you know what? He's so respectful, he's so mannerly, and he comes from a good family. Therefore, he's going to be a great partner."
Yeah.
In the
Yeah.
meantime, we didn't have really anything in our core value system, anything in common. And we didn't even discuss that. That wasn't even on the radar. It was just basically going along to get along. And then as things came up and as we took off the layers of camouflage, and now we're really seeing each other for who we are,
Yeah.
we I found myself making those excuses in my mind of why I should stay. And it was mostly because I had so much time invested and we had mutual friends, and I had all these limiting beliefs going on in my own mind
Right.
and completely forsake myself. Sorry.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Forsake yourself in kind of in a fear mode as opposed to an empowered mode. And that's the
Always from a
choices that we
place of
make.
fear.
Yeah. And it's interesting because arranged marriages are the epitome of there's two families, great wealth per se,
Yeah.
or they're arranged and they bring two strangers together that almost know not a whole lot of each other, and then are expected to fall in love and have a flourishing relationship.
Right.
When they don't even know each other and what they are and what their strengths are. Talk about just out of the frying pan and into the fire kind of situation where you need to kind of adapt to whoever was arranged for you, which is a level up from marriage completely.
Right.
And at that point, you don't even know if you're whole enough to get into a union with someone else. So that dynamic is even different than when we actually choose someone else or somebody chooses us.
Well, you're right, because the person in that situation is not allowed to respect themselves. They have to respect others around them before they're even allowed to think of that self-respect. So that's really unfortunate.
Yeah, and talk about not to poke at or the arranged marriage situation. If that's the case, that's great.
Right.
Definitely, our intent is not to judge, but it's what we're here to talk about is the choosing, and for us to choose from a place of empowerment. Because if I am single and I'm a responsible single person,
right,
and I know that I have work to do, there are shadows that I need to look at. There are patterns that I've seen over and over in my relationships.
mm-hmm.
I want to be able to be respectful enough to myself, is to be able to just sit and work with those things, like, and be single for a while. Like so many of us, get out of a relationship and then I'm newly single, I'm on the hunt.
Serial daters.
Yeah, like there's this notion that we have to be on a hunt. And
right.
is it for sexual gratification? Well, maybe for male and female, it's a little bit different in heteronormal circumstance. But it's almost like we feel this uncomfortableness of just sitting with our own crap. And again, going through what we kind of talked about is being shamed for being single. So we subconsciously get out there, and it is a form of self-sabotage to get out there and date when you're not feeling it, when you're not whole, because you're just going to use that other person as a pillow to comfort your discomfort that you're feeling from a recent breakup or some other stuff that you're feeling in your head, thinking that the other person is going to fill the void.
Right. I mean, you're puddle jumping.
Right.
You're puddle jumping, and you're not allowing yourself, as you said, to sit in it, which is what we need to do. We need to sit in that, and we need to sit in the stillness of who we are and really get to know ourselves. As you said, that shadow work, which you and I always come back to, because how can you possibly introduce someone into your own life if you don't know who you are? I mean, it's virtually impossible to cultivate a healthy dynamic with another human being, because that's where the ego shifts. And I mean, we'll get into all this down the road in other shows, but this is where the ego comes in. We get into the blame game and humiliation and name calling and all of that.
Right.
But I find, for me in the past, and you and I have been posed this question in our co-coaching, how do I begin? How do I begin to choose me without offending others? Because when I began to choose me, I offended a hell of a lot of people because they didn't like the change. And we are fearful of change. We're very fearful of change, which is why we like to stay stuck. And like you said, we'll stay in unhealthy relationships, and we'll make every excuse in the book why we're going to stay in that relationship.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people who want to be empowered and want to choose themselves, and they're not quite sure how.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's interesting because that choice, again, we're sometimes shamed of making that choice for ourselves. Oh, you did this and you abandoned the relationship. but you really abandon yourself before the relationship, way before that. And that's what causes you to want to leave the relationship to start with. I'll give you a personal example of me in union of marriage. Way back in my 20s, it was very early on when I, very young when I connected with somebody, what I felt was a connection.
Right.
Probably a lot of dependency there. Is that what I love the most about that relationship is that I enjoyed the family time spending with her family, which is something that was amazing to me. It was great family, a lot of fun, meals together, laughs, which was completely opposite of what I didn't get growing up. So I was attracted to the household, to that dynamic between mother-in-law and father-in-law and siblings, and they had siblings that was their age. I have siblings that are much older than I am. So I stayed because I came from a place of lack. I was lacking that dynamic. So I conveniently said, well, even unhappy, I stayed because I didn't want to lose that dynamic. Because then what would I do? I would be just me alone. And I was scared out of my mind to be alone. And in fact, that's what happened is I got some point is I ended that relationship because of other reasons that we can talk about at some other time. Sure. But then I got hunting again immediately because I was uncomfortable being single, because I was at a certain age. I was 33 and single. Oh my God, what? I got to
that's
rush.
The end of the world.
Yeah, I got to rush and find somebody and have kids and have a family and a picket fence and the dog and travel and go to work and then have grandchildren and blah, 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 all of this program that we have.
Right.
So again, hey, let's not concentrate on being whole. Let's concentrate on fulfilling this hierarchical thing that's in society right now.
Well, all the societal expectations that are placed upon you, right? To be married by a certain age. And as you said, to have the house or the condo and the dog, the white picket fence, the kids. I mean, to basically go into the status quo through self-forsaking, through a lack of self-love, lack of introspection, lack of wholeness, just so that you can connect with another human being that you ultimately may not be happy with.
Yeah, well, of course, if you're not happy with yourself, again, we always say this, and we'll probably say it on every show, is
a million times.
Relationships start with you and end with you.
Right.
So that's the important part.
And yeah, I'm happy you're bringing that up, because that was something that I never really understood when I used to hear that happiness begins with you. I mean, and again, back to another show down the road, but distraction, right? There's just, when we're not choosing ourselves, we're looking for that distraction in our relationship. We're looking to distract. So I don't need to focus on this person because I'm not getting any happiness here. So I'm going to distract myself and look elsewhere, whether it's playing golf or being on social media 24/7. And and I totally identify with that 100%. And I do take responsibility and accountability for that, because I got so hooked into social media as my relationship was breaking down, because I really didn't want to deal with it. And I made every excuse in the book as to why I was on social media.
Right.
It was very, very unhealthy. It was unhealthy for the both of us. It was unhealthy to my children. And it was very, very damaging to me in the long run.
Yeah. And it's that classic self-sabotage. Right. We do
100%.
We do the behaviors of that. Yeah. And I'm sure I'm guilty of all of those things. I mean, for me, it was more the material thing. I would go out and just get that dopamine hit by buying the next thing or starting the next business or doing anything to distract myself by doing something else, everything but the inner work and getting whole with myself. So yeah. So,
well, wonderful.
Very interesting.
This is a fantastic, interesting topic. I'm really, really happy that you chose this. I think this is a fantastic eye opener, and it's very soulful, and it's a great place for people to begin that journey of personal growth and introspection. Yeah,
for sure. And I think if we can give our audience some tidbits right off the cuff, and how do we begin doing that, is one, keep following the movement selfishly.
Number one.
Yeah, keep turning back to this show. Give us all the thumbs up and the 5-star ratings and the comments.
Share,
and
like,
the sharing.
like.
and talk about it with everybody. That's the first thing. Selfishly, that's the first thing you should do. But really, it's a matter of, I mean, this is what the movement is about, is that we want to be able to have people feel alive and thrive in
Yes.
their relationship with self first. Because how amazing would it be that we have amazing single people everywhere? And how do we start that is really by introspection. And introspection is really simple. Even something simple as just journaling. Just journal your
Oh,
thoughts and emotions.
so
And
much value.
so much value in just doing that. So how do we start, choosing relation from a place of empowerment? Start the empowerment by doing introspection work, by writing down your thoughts, feelings, and emotions. And then we can really begin to kind of flush that out of our head and realize what our patterns are, right?
Right. Right.
Once we see what the patterns are and where our mind is, that is the awareness. We can start to build some self-awareness. And of course, in order to get deeper and deeper, there are, various sources. We obviously have the courses that we currently have available and will have available in the future, where it allows us to recreate that and rediscover that wholeness within us, to be able to create those fulfilling relationships. So.
Right. And I think it's fair to say that you have to put in the work. It's like anything. You can't not show up at work and expect that paycheck. You have to put in the work, and you have to be willing to really be real with yourself and to get raw in that journaling. I mean, as coaches, we give our clients all the time journaling exercises, and in our courses, they're journaling exercises. And it's because there's something valuable when you think it, and then you write it, and then you see it, and then you're saying it over again in your mind. So it's really being reinforced into your nervous system to create that change.
Right.
That change.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think this has been an interesting topic, and I think we've covered some really good points here. And again, Tanya, I want to appreciate your time and thank you for our listeners, and thank you for the Alive Thrivers that follow us. And we're available on pretty much all the social platforms. And we really appreciate your time today.
Yeah. Thank you very much, everybody.
We'll see you on the next show. Thanks.